Hello, Middle Earth SBG players. Welcome to another episode of an unexpected podcast. And today I have with me Evan Iverson, Matt Iverson, and Rainier from theoretically Pennsylvania, but it's I guess Honduras now. So basically,
two easily confused places.
Yes.
Very similar. People look very same too.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to be talking about the Host of the Dragon Emperor, and we're going to be talking about the Legion in depth. We actually have a couple of members on this podcast who have a ton of practice with this Legion at this point. We're going to be going into how to build them, how to beat them, how to play them, and just all the details you need if you want this to be your next army that you play at major events like Nova, Articon, and such. So also, we're going to touch on Warhammer Fest. Probably not a lot to say there for anyone who saw Warhammer Fest, but we'll talk about that. And then after that, we'll get into the list review, then talk about the Legion. So starting off with Warhammer Fest, for those who didn't see it, there is probably a lot of backlash on Facebook. A lot of people are seeing that a lot of players are very upset that there really wasn't any announcements, but even more so that it seems like there were supposed to be announcements, but GW's hands have been tied. That is the general consensus that I'm seeing from people who saw the stream, is that, there was supposed to be something. So all we got was a diorama of the four hobbits of the Fellowship hiding from the Ringwraith. So who here has seen this diorama? You've seen it? Okay, so just Matt hasn't seen it.
Yeah.
All right. There are a lot of pictures floating around on the internet. I mean, I suppose whoever's, the host can throw it up on the screen if you find it. But I mean, that's it. It's a diorama. I imagine that you're probably, for competitive purposes, you might be able to take the Ringwraith off and actually utilize it. It's not an extremely dynamic pose. It's just kind of like the Ringwraith kind of hunched over, kind of standing around. Not a bad pose, though. I imagine what a lot of people might do, though, with this Ringwraith is possibly convert it into a Grima, but I have to actually see exactly how that'll work. I know a lot of people were kind of anticipating Grima because when they showed the outline of the model, it looked like Grima hunched over.
Is he on a horse?
He's on a horse. The Ringwraith is on a horse. It's
horse.
Exactly that scene where like the hobbits are they're hiding under the tree.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the Ringwraith is on horse, and it seems like Evan's get it pulled up here. So you can see it here on screen for those who are watching on YouTube, and it looks like it comes as a multi-part kit where the Ringwraith, they made it as a playable figure. So, okay,
right,
that's actually
it slots in there, it looks like, yeah.
That's perfect. I think that's great. So I'm actually perfectly happy to have this type of Ringwraith. I think that the hunched over look actually is perfect for, like, I know there's already a mounted model of the Tainted, but, this is another one, I guess. What do you guys think? Any thoughts on the Ringwraith itself?
So this is a neat Ringwraith. I'm actually wondering if you could just because I assume this is plastic. I wonder if you could just kind of like saw off the top here and then just replace it with some Grima stuff with like the top half of Grima, and you get Grima on a horse.
I think you easily could. I mean, some might argue. Oh, good.
Oh no, I was just saying that the Tainted, I think, was generally used as a Grima on horse. And I think this could definitely fill the same role depending on how expensive this diorama is and whether or not you want a new Ringwraith or not.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll see.
I imagine the Tainted is still in metal, isn't it? Or is it now been converted to fine cast resin?
I think it's still metal.
I think it is.
On that, though.
If it's still metal, then this is a much easier material to
conversion
work with. Yeah, for the conversion purpose. So,
I mean, you could conceivably just like saw off the hands and replace the hands, or maybe even just paint the hands slightly differently.
You might be able to sand it down. I wonder if you can sand the hands down just to get a smooth surface and just paint it with skin tone colors.
And I wonder if you could just like cut out a Grima face and like put it inside the cowl.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
So I think that's for competitive purposes. I mean, for the diorama purposes, I think it'd be great for, obviously there's a lot of hobbyists and artists here, but we are a competitive podcast. So we tend to focus first on what are the competitive applications we can use for this thing. The tree, obviously useless. And the hobbits, honestly, you know, I'll probably take these hobbits and somehow figure out how to just get them to sit around in my hobbit army. As you know, I've got like flowers, and you know, maybe they'll sit in Gandalf's cart. Maybe that's what I'll do.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, part of it depends on like what the sub pieces of this look like. Whether, you know, when you actually see these things on the sprue, whether each one of these 4 guys is like a separate guy that you sit on the log, or whether that piece you see in the middle left over there where they're all sitting on the log just comes as one precast piece.
Yeah, that would be really unfortunate if it's all useful. One precast piece.
Yeah.
I can imagine you probably might be right, though, because if you look at the way, I don't know which hobbit it is. It looks like Pippin in the blue shirt is sitting next to Frodo. His arm seems to almost overlap Frodo's, where it looks like that's a very intentional placement. So, and then also Pippin's leg seems to be almost hard connected to Sam's. So if that's the case, then yeah, unfortunately, it might be just one piece. And my dreams of having a bunch of sitting old hobbits is is over.
The only thing I could see with that is maybe trying to put them on a different base and then maybe turning them into an objective marker, but they're probably
too big for an objective marker.
Yeah, they're probably.
Yeah, it depends on what size objective markers you use.
That's true.
Well, other than that, I think the nail in the coffin for this would probably be, you know, with recent price hikes on GW, most likely you're looking at a very expensive diorama. So we don't know the prices of it, but imagine this is, I mean, you know, I can't speculate on how many people will purchase an object, but
so can you unpack a bit they weren't at liberty to reveal anything else thing that you mentioned earlier?
So I personally did not see the stream. Evan, did you see the stream itself?
I did not, no.
Okay. So from what I understand, and everyone kept repeating the same thing. So I would have to imagine this was a one-off line. Is just simply, hey, we have much more to show you, is the general consensus that I've heard, but they can't. They're just their hands are tied. I kept hearing that word, so I imagine they must have said it. If that's the case,
I really like how like all of the top secret Ukraine war projections are plastered all over Discord, but you know we can't get any information about what's coming next for Middle Earth.
Right. That's actually a very good point. You know, here's all right. So I'm going to go into a little speculation before we jump into the main topics. But I mean, I imagine it has something to do with the Amazon TV show. Now, I could be totally wrong here. Okay. And I'm not implying here that The Last Alliance or something out of the Amazon TV show is the next thing to be produced. I don't know that. All right. I'm not saying that, but 2 ways I imagine that could have impacted. One is if there was some sort of negotiation on the Amazon TV show, maybe something happened with that negotiation. They wanted to pivot, and that pivot just affected the entire line of the Middle Earth range. So why would they want to pivot? Well, the Amazon Rings of Power, regardless of anyone's opinion of the show, didn't do well from a numbers standpoint. The performance wasn't as projected. So it could have made GW a little bit afraid about whatever contract they may have been in negotiation with. This is even assuming that GW was even in a contract to begin with Rings of Power. I have no idea. So this could be a lot simpler where it's, you know, just simply the contract expired that GW had. I know that they were in like 5-year intervals or 10-year intervals of some sort. I remember we were able to keep track of it back in the day, but now I have no idea. And so maybe the contract expired and it's under renegotiations. And when it's under negotiation, they can't carry forward, even if models were in production and plans were, you know, that just was something GW should have planned on, I guess you can say. So that's my speculation, is something contractually. Unfortunately, whether or not it's related to Rings of Power or not, there's really no. The only thing I can say is I imagine the GW team would not have even bothered coming on stage, not even bothered with this diorama necessarily, if there wasn't something in the future. So I imagine GW has some intent to do something with the product down the line. There's no reason to even say it. There have been Warhammer Fests where Middle Earth has been totally ignored. So that's a move they're comfortable with making. So it at least gives some sliver of hope that maybe something is coming. But what do you guys think?
So as Devin said, it's completely confirmed entirely. We will be getting a Last Alliance supplement in the next 3 months.
You heard it here
GW
first,
is
folks.
just hiding it from us. Yep. Devin's leaked it all.
That's right.
I always have to disclaimer that because I'm like, I know people automatically assume it's like, oh, Devin mentioned that there's Last Alliance coming. I'm like, I am not saying that. I have no idea.
So what we really need to do is we need to find some 21-year-old Air National Guard idiot who decides he needs to put GW's secret plans to prove that to prove he's right up on a video game server.
There you go.
That's what we need.
We need as much dedication on GW as we have on major events.
Yeah,
in the world.
Devin, do you play Minecraft?
Man,
you ready to leak these?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, we don't know anything at this point. I mean, there's slots for seminars at different events like Nova, Articon, and such, but you have to confirm those slots well in advance, long before you even actually know that they're happening. So I like, as people noted in the previous Nova, I had to cancel the Miller seminar because I have to schedule it in December. And then, I only find out in like June if that's actually going to happen. So, and I imagine Articon's in the similar boat. So just because you see seminars doesn't mean that actually will happen. So the only next news we would get is probably another Warhammer World, which, if from my understanding, the doubles Warhammer World event is over. So now the next one we'll be waiting for is Throne of Skulls, and that's in December. So I might be wrong on that, maybe on some of the timelines of that, but it'll be a while before we hear anything, is what I'm thinking. Assuming, it's not earlier events.
Gotcha. All right, then.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the list review. So for those who don't know, while Matt pulls this up on the screen, is we actually will review lists that you submit to us on the YouTube channel or on Facebook. If you bother us there, you can find one of us and submit it there, but mainly on the YouTube channel. And today, we actually have an Army of Lake Town list. Now, we analyze these lists from a competitive standpoint. So just please note that when you message us these lists. You can give us a fun list, but so Matt, what kind of list do we have today?
So this is an Army of Lake Town list, but this is an Army of Lake Town list with a twist, and it is certainly a little bit of a fun list. So, so this is, I realized I didn't copy over the name. This is a list from To Be There Again, and
Probably
To Be There
real
Again,
name, right?
Yeah, whose real name is Alex. Wanted to share the list that won me the current, as of writing, largest tournament in Texas. Congratulations. The idea of the list is to have a list with Radagast the Brown on Great Eagle, and the best way I thought to do that was to take Radagast and Tom Bombadil and just max out as many models as he could.
Going bold.
Yeah, so he enjoyed playing this list, and he's curious about our thoughts, and also asked how to adjust the list down to 650, if that is even possible. And I think it is, but we'll talk about how. And he also is calling me out, by the way. He says, P.S. I will avenge my friend for what Matt did to him in round 1 at Nova 2022.
What are you
Can't
doing
wait
to
to
people,
steal
man?
there. So yeah, this is one of those things where I have to make like the super villain depraved assassin confession, which is, I don't remember who I played at round 1 of Nova 2022.
The Thanos just, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, that's right. Who are you? Yeah. Did I kill your father? Okay, maybe. Yeah, so
I'm sure once you see the face, the name, and the list.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've all had those, like, at some point where someone goes up to you and they're like, oh yeah, I remember when we played this game at XYZ tournament and you beat me, and it's like, sorry, I don't remember that game. I don't remember all of my games.
We play a lot of games, everyone. So that's
once you play like at so many tournaments, you kind of start just remembering your losses. That's what I'm starting to figure out.
Yeah. So Alex's friend, I apologize. I don't remember the first game of Nova 2022. I hope it was a fun game. I really don't recall killing your parents, and if I did do it, it was completely unintentional.
That'll hold up in court.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Hopefully I won't need to go through the rest of my life like constantly fearing that this guy's going to leap out of the bushes and
actually, I think he's coming for Nova 2023 for you. So
yeah, I think he probably is.
That's I think you already got the date well in advance.
Yeah.
You've got approximately what, 3.5, 4 months to live, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So, all right. But in his list, he has, as advertised, Radagast the Brown on Great Eagle, with Sebastian coming in at 205 points. He also has, I'll skip to the end, he has Tom Bombadil, also as advertised. And, he did what I would do to try and get the most models into an army containing these two folks. And he has Army of Laketown, and that comes with the Master of Laketown, who has 15 Laketown Guard, 3 that just come as is, 7 with Spear, 5 with bow. Alfred the Counselor, who has with him 11 Laketown Guard, 4 with bow, 5 with spear, and then just 2 regular dudes. And then he has Braga, Captain of the Guard, with 11 warriors, 3 with bow, 2 with just their swords, and then 6 with spear. So it comes out at 42 models, 37 warriors, and this is a 700 point list, and he has 12 bows. So all right, thoughts on this? And why don't you give your thoughts on the list as is, and then we should all address his specific question of how does he convert this to 650 so we can bring it to Nova and conquer the world?
Well, I don't know how I'd bring it to 650. I mean, it's probably easy to just drop some models, but I like the idea that it's a horde army that can go up to fight 4, right? With the Master, and then you have a giant eagle with magic and Tom Bombadil, who does a ton of shenanigans. Now, I read the list initially, and I read, okay, wow, Radagast the Brown, well, all those models, that's pretty good. And then I went down and I saw Tom Bombadil, 160 points, and I thought to myself, why am I not playing this army with all these models? Because it's just such a shock in your face to get all these models and still have a 200 point sink with Radagast and 160 point sink for a little dude that does a ton of shenanigans. I like it. I like it a lot, especially for all the scenarios that you're going to go up against, because Tom Bombadil can shut basically anything down, and Radagast can go retrieve anything or go objectives, anything like that, all while having the massive bodies to where you can put 10 or 12 guys in one direction. It doesn't really bother you. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, not only does Tom Bombadil have shenanigans, but I think the real use for him is, as long as Radagast the Brown stays, I think, within 6 inches of him, he basically he functions as Radagast's staff, because he could just continually pump more will into Radagast, who can continue to pump it out. And you reach a certain point also where Radagast can just kind of be thrown in with wild abandon, because every time that Tom's going to increase the might, will, and fate, either Radagast or the Eagle. And actually, I'm kind of wondering, I've never actually had this situation
whether it affects both the Eagle and Tom, or just one or the other.
Or I'm sorry, both the Eagle and Radagast, or one or the other.
You're talking about just for the purpose of both heal 1.
All right. So Radagast, so Tom Bombadil has a spell. I can't remember what it's called, and it has a 6-inch range. He casts it on a 2+, and when he casts it on a figure, it increases it restores a wound, it restores a might, it restores a will, and it restores a fate.
You're talking about Tom, not Radagast.
Tom casts this spell on other people. Sorry. Yeah. And so the question that occurred to Evan and I is, if Radagast the Ground is riding the Great Eagle, does it do these 4 things to both Radagast and the Great Eagle whenever you cast it?
Even if it did, you'd only restore a wound on the eagle. It couldn't get.
Yeah, you'd only restore a wound on the eagle, but even so, that's
how you kill the model, right?
That is true.
That's how you destroy this entire contraption, is because the eagle doesn't have any fate. He can't take fate from Radagast. And it's only got 3 wounds, and then you either can just go, boom, there I go. I've regained wounds on the eagle, and I've topped off Radagast's store of resources, or it's less good if you're forced to restore the eagle, and you have to fill up on, and you can't fill up on might, will, and fate. So I guess that's sort of the question.
I mean, you're effectively paying 365 points for Radagast with the ability to restore 1 might, will, fate every turn.
But just before we go on, does anybody have access to? Does anybody have a copy of Armies of Lord of the Rings, Andy? Have you got it in there?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So check out Tom Bombadil and just see how that spell works, whether it affects
the spell is in the main
rule book. Yeah, hang on.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I got all of Tom's stuff, but the thing is, you'd almost have to really be precise about where you throw Radagast, because with Tom only having a 6-inch range, I understand that nobody can charge him, but you can block him out. You basically have to keep Radagast within 6 inches of wherever Tom can go at any point in time. And you got this horde army now in front of you, combined with the opposing army. Like you probably have to do heroic combats every turn to bounce in and out in order to keep this going.
That brings up a good question. Like, what could you get with 160 points? Because I think you can add quite a lot if you do take out.
You can, but all right. So there's a couple things with Tom. That ability just to restore the might, will, and fate basically is going to make Radagast indestructible, as long as he stays kind of within that zone. And I think what you do with Tom is you're going to have your line of Lake Town guys, and Tom's just going to be behind it, and Radagast is going to be jumping forward of the line. And basically you set up your line, you wait for somebody to charge it. So you've got shield wall on shield wall, and then Radagast will kind of jump to one end of the other guy's shield wall and start pitching guys down the line of the shield wall. And Tom can just run behind his own line, get within 6 inches of Radagast, and cast his spell. So I don't think, unless Radagast is going to go off on some side quest somewhere, I don't think getting him out of range of Tom is going to necessarily be a problem, because I think Tom kind of running around behind the lines is going to be able to get him wherever he needs to be. Plus, the other role that Tom has, by the way, is to basically that the master is going to follow Tom around, because nobody can get within an inch of Tom. So his other job is to make sure that the master never runs out of might, because that's something else he could do. So the master's just going to keep, firing up his banner and his fight for, and also make sure that nobody can get at the master, because his zone of thou shalt not come within 1 inch of me is going to kind of envelop.
Kind of a tough dual role, though. You got to follow around Radagast while at the same time keeping the master's bubble with the majority of the army, and also keep the master with him.
Yeah, but I think you can probably do that. I don't think that's going to be that. And Radagast doesn't need to leave the bubble all the time, because when he's on that eagle, he's pretty darn tough. So it's not like he's going to be, and he's got 6 will, so he can kind of go out of the zone on occasion when he needs to and come back.
Kill him.
Yeah. So refreshing stomp.
I guess I just know when Angmar players play Barrow Whites are often targeting heroes right on the front lines. Because you're talking about 2 ranks of Lake Towners, plus you don't want to trap them. So now a 3rd inch. So you have effectively 3 inches beyond the front line. I mean, I don't disagree. that if you put Radagast kind of like on the flanks and such, you can keep him within that. I just, you know, you definitely, I mean, whoever's playing this just definitely has to really pay attention to where they're throwing Radagast.
Yeah, I agree with you, Devin. I think that's one of those things that we talk about on the show a lot is you can't come up with just a really good list and expect it to win. A lot of what this list will do is you have to be able to pilot it pretty well. Like you have to know how to use your horde. You have to know when to have Radagast go do shenanigans away from Tom Bombadil and when to keep him close. That you brought up a good point with the Barrow Wights. Like for that, the player would have to know stay far away and try to shoot the opponent to like pepper them till they get. And that's what like what popped out with me at first. It wasn't Radagast, it wasn't Tom Bombadil. It was the idea of how many warriors you can get with those two things. So if you play this, you do have to really take into consideration how to use the synergy, but also how to use it all in 3 different ways.
Yeah. There's also interesting stuff you can do, by the way, with Braga too, by increasing his might. Because remember, he's got a 50% chance of getting stuff for free. So you can give him a point of might, and that might actually be, 2 or even 3 points of might that you're giving back to him with Tom. But by the way Refreshing Song reads is, this power targets one friendly model within range. The target immediately recovers a single lost wound, as well as a single lost might, will, and fate point spent earlier in the battle. The target also immediately recovers from the effects of any magical power they wish. So it affects the mount.
Both. It heals. Yeah, it heals them both.
I don't think it heals them both.
You pick which, either the horse or the rider.
Yeah, but that's
you
direct
pick
conflict
which one
with
gets the wound back.
The whole difference between Black Dart and
no. So I know where you're going.
This is not what we're talking about.
Yeah. So this does affect both the rider, or both the mount and the rider, because it doesn't have the Black Dart exclusion. But it says the model immediately recovers a single lost wound. So if you were to recover a wound on both Radagast and the Eagle, you have recovered more than a single lost wound.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
Yep. But there's nothing that says that you couldn't give a wound back to the Eagle and a might, will, and fate back to Radagast. So yeah, I mean, I kind of like.
Interesting side note, all of us kind of didn't mention yet. Tom Bombadil automatically makes models fearless within 3 inches of him, which is a unique thing for an army of Courage 2. So, just a quick heads up on that.
Yep.
Well, I wouldn't call it unique, but it's definitely very useful.
Well, not unique. You're right. Useful. Very useful. You're right. Not unique.
Yeah, he can also cast Banish too, which is kind of a useful add-on to this army too. If you got ring wraiths running around, he can start making them go away. Well, all right. So any thoughts about this list as is? I mean, one thing that leaps out at me is I think he can get one more bow in this, can he? Because he's got 37 warriors.
I probably ran out of points.
Well, yeah, but he's got more spears than he needs. I don't think there's any particular reason he can't
swap a spear for a bow. Yeah,
you can throw another one in if he wants to.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering whether he can decrease the number of spears he has slightly and just throw in like one more 5-point guy with a sword.
Probably more valuable than all the spears, but
yeah.
I think he's got a good split.
Yeah, I guess so, because he wants. Yeah,
well, here's the thing. You want a 50-50.
Yeah.
You also want someone supporting Braga. He is just at the right amount of warriors for the bow limit, right? He's at 37, which means he gets an extra bow in there. And he's at 42 models, which gives him an even amount of models for the breakpoint. So yeah, I don't think
probably good enough.
Is a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall thoughts on the list. I hate to say it, I'm a bit of a curmudgeon. I'm not a huge fan of this list. And I will explain why. So I feel like there are a couple like inherent overarching issues with this specific style and idea that you're going with that are kind of hard to fix. And there are some that are a result of specific models in the list. So I'll start off with the specific models, I guess. And I mainly dislike the inclusion of Radagast the Brown. And when people are watching this, obviously there's some confusion because he seems like, right, a perfect fit for Radagast, right? He restores his might. He's this big, powerful character. Radagast can cast so much more because of the extra will. But using Radagast the Brown as your main impact model, Radagast the Brown is the model that's going to win you the game. And in my opinion, he has flaws that make it at the tippity top level a very exploitable army list. So first and foremost, and I think the biggest flaw is that Radagast the Brown does not have heroic strike. Now, there are ways to circumvent this. You have heroic defense, right? But the issue with that is that does not affect the eagle. So you need to be so careful with Radagast, and you need to play him super passively, because if your opponent ever gets a striker in on him and you get the trap, that eagle's going down, and then your entire game plan is completely gone. Because you no longer have the ability to be that offensive threat that you need. And sure, you have a decent number of Lake Towners, but at 700 points, that's not a really significant amount of models. Most armies at 700 points will have a similar model count. And while Lake Towners are good, dealing with armies with more heroes and having similar model counts, they just can't quite cut it. So that's part of the reason why I'm just not an overly huge fan of Radagast being the sort of conduit. But, and we can talk more about this later. If you're going down to 650 points, I think the very obvious choice is Gwahir, right? He fills a very similar niche. He doesn't have the casting aspect, but he has more of the combat aspect. When Gwahir calls a heroic defense, no one can touch him, right? Because you can't might your rolls anymore. None of your bonuses work. So he's super hard to kill. You can basically keep him calling heroic strikes and doing all these things over and over and over again. And he's much more reliable and cheaper as well. So if I were to drop that down to 650, I would take Gwahir. And sort of before I open the floor, I guess, moving on to some more inherent weaknesses of the army, I think that that as I talked about earlier, if your Lake Towners aren't able to hold up long enough for Radagast to do everything he needs to do, which you are relying on Radagast to do everything, you can cut through the army. Like something like an Easterlings, maybe. Sure, they have to be careful about Radagast, right? They need to make sure that he doesn't do too much damage, but their high fight value and their defense 6, I think in the end will be able to beat out this list, because hurls from Radagast can only do so much, and he can't deal with Rutabi and the Dragon Emperor and stuff like that. That's just an example. But other lists of a similar ilk also do well. And I'd say even more of an issue with this list is your defense 4 and lack of blinding light. I think that is the biggest issue. That's just sort of an inherent property of using Tom Bombadil with this mega hero. And just because we've got the double assaults, which are 2 of, I'd argue, the best lists in the entire game. And they're both super heavy on shooting. I remember I played against you, Dad, with a list somewhat similar to this, just with Elendil and Saruman instead of Radagast and Tom Bombadil. And with the assault on Lothlorien, I believe you killed something like 8-9 models on the first turn of shooting, something like that. And the army was just completely devastated. And obviously assault upon Helm's Deep would be worse. Now, is there a solution to this without absolutely changing the entire army? No. But it is something that I wanted to point out, that if you're using this army, you need to be cognizant of and know, which scenarios to veto if you've got veto system, and how and what to prioritize in the sense of just getting into combat as quickly as possible. So
remind me, how expensive is Gwahir?
Is
150. So you get an extra guy.
You get an extra guy.
You
Okay,
could
yeah.
even
Then you drop Radagast and get Gwahir.
650. You could drop Tom Bombadil and have the 2 Eagle Boys. That might be interesting, depending on how magic the player
it's
is.
650 or 700?
No, he's talking about
650.
Yeah, if
you drop Tom,
Rainier was saying 700, remove Tom Bombadil, throw in Gwahir, and then have 2 Eagles. That, I believe, Rainier, is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
He was talking about the current as is, not the.
You could even drop a few people and go 650 because you're saying, you have to drop 40 points.
I don't know.
There's a lot of things you could do with this list. I think the bones of it is really good. Even as is, you could try it. It's really good. But I like how there's still going to be a weakness in every list.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't think you take Tom Bombadil out of this, because I think Tom Bombadil is kind of what makes this list, and
he's the point of the list.
Yeah, exactly. He's the point of the list. I mean, you could, by the way, even at 700, change Radagast the Brown to Gwahir, and
the question is, what do you put in?
Well, I think at that point you need to put in a captain and some extra guys.
I hate
maybe that's not
that.
worth it. Yeah, that may not be worth it. But I think you're right. I mean, my instant thought when I saw this and saw the ask about what do I do if I drop to 650 is you change out Gwahir. And I wonder if there's some other stuff you could.
I've been running around some ideas as far as Gwahir, because I agree with everything Evan said. I think Radagast being a single opponent failure is super dangerous. So 2 things I thought about. One, I mean, if you're going to stick with convenient allies, which I actually think is unnecessary for this list, and I'll go into why, but if you want to, I don't know 100% that I like this option, but Dane kind of it was an interesting kind of sort of pick. You wouldn't play him quite like Radagast, but I think his ability to absolutely crush through models more reliably, though he loses the hurl mechanic, of course. But he's 100. He's pretty much guaranteed to just tear through things. Another one I thought about was Elendil. I'm trying now think into Red Alliances a little bit, because if you look at this, the only disadvantage of being Red Alliance is that if one component of the army dies, then you break, right? So, but Tom Bombadil can't die, and if you lose Radagast to Brown, you're dead anyway. So, I mean, you'll break, but theoretically, Tom Bombadil's here for you, so you can just pit him right next to the master auto passes, stand fast, and it creates a chain reaction. So you're probably fine even in a breaking scenario. So now I'm like, okay, going into full depth of now every alliance is available to you, because it almost doesn't make that much of an impact. I'm kind of like, what is the most powerful hero now on the good side that you could absolutely put into this, just ignoring alliances entirely? I don't know if Elendil is too big. He would be the 700 point variant of this, of course. But as far as 650,
yeah,
I mean,
I was thinking Thorin.
Thorin's a good shout too. He just doesn't kill as fast as Dane, and I think in this list you got to kill as fast as possible.
Well, I mean, one of the advantages to using, that's true. He doesn't kill it, but what he gets is the free heroic combats. So he basically can use that extra point of might just to kill stuff.
Yeah.
To get an additional +1, but that was just a thought, and you can get some more guys. I was also toying around with Bard, and throwing Bard into this list. Yeah, with the girls. I mean, and trying to work out the math. And I think you might be what's Bard with the girls, Ev, point wise? Do you recall?
Bard with girls is 185, I believe.
So you could do Bard with girls and some more guys. And the advantage there is that Tom can just shepherd the girls around, right? The girls can stay within an inch of Tom, and then they in turn follow Bard around.
I just don't think Bard is going to have the killing power of Thorin, Dane, Gwahir.
Well, Bard has exactly the killing power of Thorin.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're right. Exactly, this killing power of Thorin. Yeah, which then the other models kind of come across as superior to me, because the whole thing. If
but
you're
remember, Alfred can Alfred fuel up Bard, or no, can he not do it in this
he
list?
Can.
He
can.
Yeah. So Alfred can fuel up Bard.
Then you're gonna want Tom Bombadil to be babying the master, right? Because if you don't have that buff going, your list is gonna get shredded like paper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tom can do both, right? I mean, he can shepherd the girls around and then be casting the spell on the master to keep up the master's might, because you don't have to do it that much with Bard if Bard's on 6 might anyway. The other thing that's actually interesting about this list that I kind of forgot about, because Tom can't top people up, or Tom can only top people up. He can't bring might above what they had. But early on in the game, if this list isn't engaged, Alfred does his thing, and then Tom can top up Alfred, and then Alfred can then get people above their above their max. So this is one of those lists where the longer you leave it alone, the stronger it gets, because of that Alfred dynamic. And it's a better Alfred dynamic than the one with trying to fuel him up with either Bomber or Gandalf, because there's only a 50% chance of that working, whereas Tom's getting this spell off on anything but a 1.
I guess for the sake of time, I suppose Alex, we're just going to go into the overlying, just what we're thinking here. As far as bringing it down to 650, I think the smoothest, easiest option is what Evan said. Gwahir, it seems like Matt agrees. Seems like Rainier was pretty much on pace with that. So if you're coming to Nova with this list, that's probably how you're going to do it. Otherwise, definitely experiment with some different options other than Radagast. We named a bunch here. Go ahead and look into, as far as Bard, I thought was a great shout out. Thorin, Dane, possibly others, So look through your list if you want to play around with it at 700, because I think we all agree with Evan that, this single point of failure in just Radagast is rough. So with that being said, if anyone else wants to submit lists, just do so in the YouTube comments section, and we will give you our tactical analysis just as we did here. So let's go into the main topic today, which is the host of the Dragon Emperor. And at this point, I believe, Matt, you're clocking in how many games with this army?
I've had a lot of games with this army at this point. It is well in excess of 20 at this point. So it's probably up around 30 tournament games with this list.
Well, these are tournament games. The issue is the last person we interviewed had over 200 games.
Yeah,
so,
all right.
We are seriously lacking on repetition.
Yeah, you need to actually go to enough more tournaments than I do to get 200 games in on a particular list.
The army's fairly new. The guy who did the 200 games, he was playing an army that's been in existence for quite a few years, I think, at this point. So, but let's talk about it. We're going to talk about how to build it, how to play it, how to play against it. Let's start off with how to build it, because it seems like, Matt, you've cracked the sort of de facto, this is the best competitive version of this list. And also when you're talking about level. Talk about points level too. Yeah.
Okay.
Make a difference.
So, and look, there are a couple different ways to build this list, and some people like certain ways and some people like other ways. So I'll try and talk about the different versions. But basically to go through the army composition here of this legendary legion, and we've done episodes in the past about the Easterlings and about this legion where we've kind of gone through the stats, but so we're not going to go through the stats here, but just to let you know, the heroes you can get with this legendary legion are the Dragon Emperor, Rutabi, who's the woman on foot beat stick, Borgir the Conjurer, who is a tremor cannon, and then you can get Dragon Knights, you can get Easterling captains, you can get an Easterling war priest, and then you can get Easterling warriors with all their different configurations, with bows, with pikes, with shields, etc. You can get Easterling cataphracts with the banner, with the war drum, and you can get Dragon Called Acolytes, and you can get Runish War Drakes, for which models don't exist yet. So the ones you will actually use here, you will never use a war priest, because you're just going to use Borgir instead. You're never, well, I wouldn't say never, but unless you just really want to try out the lizard.
Let's make some tiers with this, shall we? So we'll do like the auto include.
All right.
Then like the really should include, then like the maybe include, or maybe leave it home, and then like the never includes.
Right. All right. So let's start with the auto include. The first auto include obviously is the Dragon Emperor. And the reason he's an auto include is because the rules say he must be included in the list.
There you go.
So you're starting
Cheating
with the
if you
Dragon
don't take
Emperor.
him.
Yes, that's right. You got to do that.
To be fair, even if he wasn't required to be taken, I think he would still be in that auto include category.
He's the point of the list, right? Then the next auto include is a single Easterling cataphract with war drum. Doesn't mean you can't take more Easterling cataphracts, but you're always going to take one Easterling cataphract with a war drum so that you can zoom around the board. And then you have the heroes that you, depending on points level, you're going to decide which ones you're going to take. And those are Rutabi, Borgir, the Easterling Dragon Knight, and the Easterling Captain.
Put the dragon in there. Oh, I'm interested.
Yeah, no, the Dragon Knight is it's good to have another fight 5 striking hero with 3 attacks running around the board. And by the way, one of the benefits of this legendary legion is all the heroes get an extra attack. So he actually has 4 attacks. Yeah. Well, yeah, they get an extra, they don't get an extra attack. They get an extra die in the duel roll.
Oh, okay.
To win the duel.
But yeah, you're right. It's one of those only times that I've been like, actually, if you bring like maybe 2 Dragon Knights in a big pointed match, like it actually sometimes makes sense.
They also provide another benefit.
Yes,
right?
They do. So the Dragon Emperor, everybody that goes into the Dragon Emperor's warband gets a free upgrade to Black Dragon status. So you're going to fill up his warband with Easterling warriors who are going to get upgraded to Black Dragons, and cataphracts get upgraded to Black Dragons. The Dragon Knights get that benefit too. So once you've filled up the Dragon Emperor's warband, if you have the points for it, or if you want more guys that are going to get the free Black Dragon upgrade, you buy a Dragon Knight and you can put 6 more guys in there and get an additional 12 points of Black Dragon upgrades for free. That's the other reason to put him in. So when you build this list, you start with a Dragon Emperor, and then you make decisions amongst those 4 whom to add. And I think the first one that you add is Borgir, just because his tremor is deadly. And his tremor can do a tremendous amount of damage, and he also gives you fury, which you need in certain circumstances. And then the next question, so there's a debate around Rutabi about whether or not she is the next one to take. And I think certainly once you hit 700 points, Rutabi becomes a must take. At 650, there is a debate as to whether you take Rutabi, or the Easterling captain and more guys. I tend to fall in the take Rutabi camp because to me, she is worth the guys. She comes with a bunch. I mean, first of all, she's significantly more powerful than the captain. She has the extra attack. She has fight 6. She has 2 fate, and she has the defense 7. And she also has the ability to like bounce back on her feet. So half the time that when she gets knocked over, she's not going to get knocked over. So she has significantly more killing power and significantly more resiliency. She also has a 3+ Master of Battle. So she has an exponential impact on the amount of might this army can put out. And that is, yeah, she comes in at 110 points. That's a 60% or a 60-point difference from the captain, or a 50% difference from, or actually probably a 45, because you're going to give the captain a shield likely if you put him on a horse.
Losing like 5 guys for the privileges.
Yeah, it's like 5 guys, and I think she's worth the 5 guys. I think there are certain situations when you rather have the captain. If you think that you are going to be in a situation where you're fighting, say, Assault on Helm's Deep, you may want the captain because you want not only the drum, but also the march. So that you're going, instead of an extra 3 inches a turn with everybody, you're going an extra 6 inches a turn with everybody. And there are also certain lists where you may want the extra the extra bodies on the ground, like maybe against a goblin town. But I think in most situations, including situations where you're going to fight mirror lists, because I've done that. I have fought these Easterlings, with Rutabi against mirror matches with the Easterlings with the captain and more guys, and I beat them every time. And it's just because of the extra power and the extra might that Rutabi brings to the game. Can just kind of, Rutabi can either overpower or at least check and tank almost any hero in the game for a significant period of time. And the Easterling captain can't do that. There's, when you have the Easterling captain, the Easterling captain runs into like an Aragorn level character and just dies. But Rutabi does not. And that's a significant ability. So that's kind of the hero. And then once you get kind of at above 700 points, 750, 800 points, then you start throwing in the Easterling Dragon Knight and taking the extra, it gives you that extra mounted hero to run around, and you get the extra Black Dragon upgrades. I think that's how you play it. And then you never bother with the Easterling War Priest. There's no real use for that. And then as far as
War Priest have any magic Brewer doesn't have?
No, I don't believe they do.
All right. Yep.
And yeah, Burger does it better.
Even outside the Legion, then, does the priest, other than spamming a bunch of Blade Wrath,
unless you want to take the priest plus war gear, which at any points level I would never recommend. They're just useless now.
Yeah,
well, that's
just
unfortunate.
that you shouldn't bring them. To be honest, there's nothing special.
Yeah, no, I think
but
that's
also,
right.
Rutabi is good for late game too because of her Master of Battle and stuff. So like that.
Yep.
The Easterlings excel late at the game. Even one of their special rules basically is for when they break. Not that you're going to want them to break, but what I'm saying is like she just is so well rounded. Defense 7, broke defense. She could knock out a Boromir for a couple of turns and not die, just like wasting him about. He's not killing anything. She could, at the end of the game, when you don't have any might, kind of do Master of Battle to where like you're doing the roll off and stuff like that. She's just a really good kind of take. But she's also could kill some stuff too if you want to roll combat with her here or there. She's not a bad model with 3 attacks, or 4 with the special dice roll if you bring the Legion. So it's really she's just a good take for her points, to be honest. If she was mounted, she would definitely be broken, but she's not mounted.
She's not mounted, which by the way I think is fine because her job is just to sit in the center of the phalanx and give punch to the phalanx.
Yeah, and like you said, like Rogue March with the drum is amazing, but for most games you just need the drum, in my opinion, and the drum you can spread out too. So it's kind of like you could choose the captain over if you want to come up against certain armies like Corsairs or Salt or something like that. But
yeah,
I don't know, for
I mean,
well-rounded, I would just take Rutabi.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about Rutabi is people always kind of underestimate how tough she is. I think in the 30 plus games that I played with the tournament games I played with this list, I think she has died once. And which, considering she is somebody who is always she's the tip of the spear with this list, because she's always out front of the phalanx, is really remarkable.
Yeah,
but anyway,
Dragon Emperor though is presenting a target priority issue where a lot of players, I think, kind of like shift focus. I imagine she might die more if the Dragon Emperor didn't exist in the list.
Yeah, but remember, so we'll talk about this when we talk about how to play the list, but the Dragon Emperor usually starts out behind the lines and comes to the fore in a particular place where he wants to come out, where he can do the most damage. Rutabi is, I usually start Rutabi at like a single figure hole in the phalanx, but Rutabi's at the front, and she, as soon as the phalanx makes contact, Rutabi's at the front, and she stays there, and she fights every turn. And the fact that she's died once, I think, out of 30 games is pretty. I think I have lost the Emperor more times than I have lost Rutabi.
And that's even thrown Rutabi into like mega heroes, I'm sure, Matt. Like,
yes, right. Which is what I do with her.
She's just one of those things to where it's like, even I've played against this Legion a few times when I came back in Pennsylvania and someone had her and it was like, wow, she's just not dying. I can surround her with anything. She's not going to die. So in a sense,
yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about how
you don't want to get her. She will die if she's surrounded, but I mean, usually she's got a whole phalanx behind her, so she's not going to get surrounded. Yeah. But you're right. Her job is to just take the biggest, toughest enemy hero and go right in their face.
And if she doesn't, she's going to kill a whole bunch of regular troops too with those 3 attacks.
So now that we've sort of finished up with the heroes, just to sort of add like maybe a bookmark in here, I'd like to talk a bit more, sort of after we talk about the troops, about sort of the other side of that argument Dad made with Rutabi at 650 points, because in my personal opinion, I think the army with the Easterling captain is far more likely to be able to compete and win tournaments than the army with Rutabi, and I'll explain why later. But I think we should probably move on to the troops now.
Yeah.
And moving on to, I think, probably the best point for point troop in the entire game. I think it's hard to argue anything else, is the Easterling Black Dragon Warrior in this legendary Legion.
From 0 to hero, though, Evan. Remember when we were like, they're the worst per point?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and now
that's
they're
right.
just incredible. So Dad, would you like the honor of going over these guys' ridiculous stats and buffs that they get?
Right. So, I mean, the stats themselves baseline are not, they're not particularly unusual. It is a fight 3, defense 6 warrior on foot. And it comes in at 7.
Italy, right?
Say again?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So it comes in at 7 points to start out with. That's without a shield. If you buy them a shield, they go up to 8 points. And then you can spend another point to give them a pike. And ordinarily you would spend 2 points to make these guys courage 4 and fight 4. But in this Legion, as long as they're in either the Dragon Emperor's warband, or they are in a Dragon Knight's warband, they get that extra 2 points for free. So basically, you're spending 9 points to get a fight 4, defense 6, courage 4 pikeman.
It gets better.
And it gets better because as long as they're within range of the Dragon Emperor, you've got a 9-point fight 5, defense 6 pikeman. And they're also, as long as they're within 12 inches of the Emperor, they're going to be getting a free banner roll on top of all of that. And that is that's a tremendous bargain right there. So what you do with the Dragon Emperor is you decide how many cataphracts you want, and the cataphract. By the way, the other thing that's useful about this list is the cataphracts suddenly, when they have a free Black Dragon upgrade, they used to be kind of overpriced because they're soft hitting cav. They are they start out as a fight 3, strength 3, defense 6 cav. At 14 points, which is not that great, but a fight 4, strength 3, defense 6 cav at 14 points. It goes up to fight. It can go up to fight 5 within 6 inches of the Dragon Emperor, and conceivably defense 7 if they get their shield ball rule. And defend, on riding defense 6 horses. That's a pretty good buy. So you decide how many of these guys you want to buy. You put them in the Dragon Emperor's warband, or conceivably, if you've got enough points in the list, the Dragon Knight's warband. And then you buy them, including give one of them the drum. And then basically everybody else in the Dragon Emperor's warband becomes a pikeman. And then you end up with, say you're going to take 3 cataphracts and 15 pikes, and they all go into the Dragon Emperor's warband. And then the other guys in this list get doled out into, either to Borger's warband, or the captain's warband and Rutabi's warband, or some combination thereof. The different ways, there are basically 3 different ways you can do this, 2 of which I've seen, one of which is just theoretical. And the 2 different ways are basically you go, you build a phalanx that has warriors with sword in front and then pikes behind. And ideally you want to get 2 pikes behind every one of your sword guys, because this army's ability to kill, this army's power drops significantly the wider it gets. This is an army that wants to fight on a narrow front, ideally around the Dragon Emperor, within 6 inches of the Dragon Emperor. And you want to kind of stack shield guys in front and then pikes behind. And then you use your cav basically to kind of tie up the flanks long enough for the phalanx in the middle to kill everything it needs to kill and roll over your opponent.
I think what you mean too, Matt, is like the lack of strength 4 in this list, and the warriors, you need the dice to kill anything, because like with most armies you'll have to roll a 6.
Yeah, I mean, you also want the dice just to win the combats, right? You want to win the combats in front and then kill with your 3 dice. One of whom's, the guy in front's going to be feigning, and then you kind of go forward. The other way people have done this is to buy Dragon Cult Acolytes and make them the front of the phalanx. There's the reason for the Dragon Cult Acolytes being in front is because they get 2 attacks. So you can get a large number of attacks. There are problems with this. The first is the Dragon Cult Acolytes cost 11 points versus 8 points for the ordinary guy with a sword. So you're paying basically 3 points for this extra attack. In some ways, it's almost a false extra attack, because the Dragon Cult Acolytes don't have the phalanx special rule, so they can't push 2 people back. So if you put 2 pikes behind them in a congested situation, they get themselves trapped. And as soon as these guys lose a combat because they're only defense 4, they die. I also find they get shot out very easily because they're defense 4.
They're the one weak spots where it's like everything's just focused on kills pretty fast.
So, I mean, if I have a couple slots left over, I'll buy a few of these guys, and I'll use them maybe with 1 pike support on the flanks to cover the flanks of the phalanx. And there are also particular situations because they've got these acrobatic special rules where they can climb and jump and leap easily, and they can like go over barriers easily. And sometimes it's nice to, use them to like clear out a house or a village. I'm not a big fan of my whole front rank is going to be Dragon Cult Acolytes, but some people have used that and some people have had success with that. I think it depends how much shooting you're going to be running into with these guys. Third way to do this, at least in theory, is to do like an all-mounted army with the Dragon Emperor, a bunch of Easterling Cataphracts, and Dragon Knights. I've never seen this, never done it. Seems like it would be kind of fun. But it's
highly doubt the competitive.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know how competitive that's going to be, but having something that is going to, if you throw in an Easterling captain on a horse and then call a march along with a drum, having cavalry that's all of a sudden moving like 20 inches on that first turn and then hitting you the next turn is going to be kind of a fun thing to try out.
It's great as like a crossbow player, like with some of my armies, what I used to play, it gets in your face right away. And then their defense 7, their horse, or the model itself is defense 7, so you're really only killing them on a 6. And if you have like 15 of them, it's really hectic. In your face, just all of a sudden a big like tin man on a horse, like in your face.
I mean, they basically come. I mean, even into the death, they come across the board in one turn, right? And then they're in your face the next turn. They are charging you on turn 2.
And that's the speed of this army list. It's like we talked about this when we reviewed Easterlings. We said like, okay, it's in the movement phase that you're kind of winning the games as an Easterling player. And I think even with the new Legion, the same thing applies.
Yeah. So the way you play this list,
wait.
All right.
Wait.
So what do you want to talk about?
You're forgetting the best warrior in the entire list.
What,
the Runish War Drake?
Now, I mentioned that earlier as something you don't take.
Well, we can't even play it anyway because we don't even know base size it's on.
Yeah, that's right.
Show up with a smog model and be like, here's my Runish.
Never take this model ever unless you just really want to have fun, and even then you're not going to have fun because they're terrible. And why
are they terrible? They have I forgot.
They have no synergy with the army. What are they? Move 8?
No, they move 6.
I think that I remember.
They have no synergy with the army. They can't move anywhere. They just get in the way. And they accomplish basically nothing for the army. So don't do this. Don't do yourself a favor and just
watch. They're going to be the cutest models ever when they come out, and everyone's going to want to play.
They're going to be like the little lizard in the tin hat. It's going to be.
People are just going to be taking one of them out of pity. Just like, oh yeah, we can. Here's my little friend over here. He hasn't killed a single model in every single one of his games, but he's here. He's here. So yeah, just to sort of talk a little bit, before we move into the more specifics of how to play, just to talk a little bit about the flip side of not taking Rutabi, because at lower points level, I'd argue, I personally would never take her lower than 700 points with the way that I like my armies to be and the way that I play Easterlings. And the reason behind this is the Emperor has a very large, there's multiple reasons behind this. One of them is the Emperor's large area of effect. He has a 6-inch +1 fight value, and he's got a 12-inch banner. This becomes less useful the less models you have. And if you have Rutabi, comparing her to simply an Easterling captain on foot, who obviously doesn't have the hitting power of Rutabi, but he still has, a decent amount of hitting power nonetheless, you can get 6 to 7 more moves in your Easterlings list. And especially at lower points levels, sure, Rutabi's good, but those 6 to 7 models, in my opinion, make all the difference. You're going from, at 650 points, you're going from 32, 33 models to 40 models, which is huge. Especially in the current state of the meta right now, where you've got these big lists, or these lists that kill tons of models. For example, Assault on Helm's Deep, where you're probably killing maybe 10 or more models before combat hits. You're going to be floundering around against them with your 20 remaining models, but your say 30, 32 remaining models are going to be much, much better against them. Similar things with Assault on Lothlorien. If you've only got like 30, 33 models, you're going to get outnumbered in all of your fights. You're going to get trapped and you are going to get killed. But this even beyond these improved matchups with more models against these top tier armies is just simply the fact that we are playing an objectives game at tournaments. And the vast majority of scenarios are scenarios like reconnoiter, like domination, and the sorts of scenarios where going from 30, 33, 34 models to 40 models is huge because it allows you to be where you need to be and still be able to just be able to do everything you need to do to win the game. And especially with things like domination, where if you have a 32 model army, you can't split up, because if you do split up, these larger armies will eat you alive. But if you have 40 models, that gets you so much closer to being able to win these games. So in my opinion, having this bigger list allows you to be able to contest more scenarios and contest scenarios where that smaller army just simply would be incapable of winning. So personally, if I were to go to a tournament that's 650 points, I would always take that larger army.
So the rebuttal to that begins with the fact that if you take the captain rather than Rotabi, you don't get 6 or 7 extra models. You really only get 5. Because you have to get the shield for the captain, or else the captain just dies too quickly.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
All right. Well, unless you want to fight the captain from the back, which you don't want to, because at that point the army has one hitter, and that one hitter is the Dragon Emperor. And for a variety of reasons, the Dragon Emperor is not somebody you want as your main hitter. And the first reason is the base is too big. So he's hard to get in. You can get him in, but usually you're not going to be able to like target an enemy model with the Dragon Emperor. You're basically you're gonna send him in and he's gonna hit something, but he's not going to be able to kind of take out target the enemy and get into a hole the way Rotabi can, and your captain just can't do it. Because your captain actually, by the way, ends up with a lower fight value than your warriors.
He's always being spear supported by your warriors, so he's always fight 5.
Yeah, but remember, if you're not going to give him the shield, you don't want him in the front rank, or else he's going to die like that, die real quick. And the other things that losing that second hitter in Rotabi puts you at a serious disadvantage against another army that has 2 hitters, because they're going to start it when you run into an army that has 2 hitters, has a Dane and a Thorin. I mean, especially somebody who can reliably take out defense 6 guys. You're gonna lose those 5 or 6 extra guys that you got very quickly, and you're gonna get carved down to size. The other advantage of Rotabi over the captain is that if you are playing an objective game, it gives you the ability to split the army, because you can take Rotabi and send Rotabi and some folks to one objective, or one flank, and you can take the Emperor and some other folks to the other flank and have enough force to go in 2 directions, whereas you cannot do that with the captain. The captain on its own with just some guys, once they get away from the Emperor, aren't going to do the job. And that's kind of downside. I mean, you are going to have a smaller army. You're going to have, at 650 points, you're going to have like a 33 model army instead of probably like a 38 or 39 model army. But against the really big armies, that's not enough to move the needle. I've never really been in a situation with this army at 650 points with Rutabi, where I'm like, what I really need is 5 more models to make this happen. Because especially the way this army fights, right? The way this army wants to fight deep, which means that it's always the opponent is always going to be wider than you. To make this army work, you need to figure out how to use terrain to basically force fights in choke points. This army excels when it is fighting in a choke point, because there are very few armies that can fight on a narrow frontage as well as this can, with 3 ranks of guys fighting, all of whom are fight 5 and all of whom are bannered. They have an ability to grind on a narrow frontage much better than the opponents do, but that means you have to figure out a way to cover your flanks, and 5 extra guys gives you like a file and a half. Whereas, Rutabi is somebody who you can just put at the front and just make sure that phalanx is going to go forward. So I don't know. I mean, I know there are people who want more figures. My feeling has been that if 33 of these guys in Rutabi aren't enough, 5 more guys won't help. Because there are situations like this army struggle, and we'll talk about this when we talk about how to beat this army. This army struggles against really high model count armies. And it does that not so much because the number of figures in this army is small. It struggles because this army depends on fighting on a very narrow frontage. And once you get above a certain number of figures, they can get, they have enough figures to kind of flood around choke points. And that's going to be a problem whether you got 33 models in the army or 39 models in the army, if you're fighting against, a 50 or 60 model army. But all right, so that's my rebuttal.
I don't want to hog this discussion too much, because it's a discussion that Dad and I have had at length, and we absolutely cannot come to a consensus over. So this will be the final thing I say about this. So a couple of points. The math on the 5 models thing is not exactly correct, because even if you do take the shield, you're getting 6 models. Throwing in the armored horse there, you can still fit in like 4 or 5 models. So you could also take the armored horse on the captain, which I think sort of, if you want the army to be able to split up more, which I'd argue it can already do pretty decently even without Rutabi, the captain actually works very, very well for that sort of split off contingent if he's on a horse, because he's able to clean up and take out those models on the side, and be able to deal with that. To your point about multiple hitters, and being able to, and rather not being able to without Rutabi, deal with those hitters. Well, first things first, if you're taking a Dane and a Thorin at 650 points, your army is going to be teeny tiny. And so your Easterlings will be able to overwhelm them before they kill enough models to make that difference. And also, remember, your Easterlings are fight 5, which means that if they have something like a Hurin or something as a second hitter, that model is going to struggle to get their value back, due to the fight 5 and either needing to strike up or just losing combats and losing their horse. So dealing with hitters without Rutabi, at least in my mind, isn't nearly as insurmountable as it may seem, especially when you have Borgir, who is just throwing off tremor after tremor after tremor. And sure, Borgir can't kill a guy, but he's able to incapacitate and weaken models. And I mean, this is just like a preference thing as the final point, but whenever I take armies that have like low 30 models, I always struggle against hordes. When I get up to that 40 or maybe even more model count, I feel so much more comfortable being able to deal with them. And obviously that is more down to a player preference thing, right? Dad feels more comfortable with less models in Rutabi. I feel way more comfortable with that extra backup. So that's sort of what it comes down to.
Certainly not to get bogged down too far into this subject. Otherwise, people won't know how to beat this thing.
Well, one last point, and that is that if you're going to take the captain at 650 points, I would not advise putting him on a horse, because as soon as you put him on a horse, he can't get backed up by the pikes. So he actually becomes one of the lower fight value figures in your army. So
actually, good final point on that.
I think Devin and I have come to the conclusion that Evan will be a lawyer just like his father.
Yeah.
I learned from the best.
And this whole time I was thinking, put 4 Dragon Knights in the front rank and go to town. I'm like, where's that?
Devin and I are like, push the model 6 inch. Oh, they have a drum. Oh, whoa, Rogue March. What's that? Rutabi sounds cool. Is it an upgrade?
Yeah.
So also not discounting the march as well. I don't think I even mentioned that, but in some circumstances, the march plus the drum can be.
So in my mind, that's the reason to take the captain instead of Rutabi, is if you were in a situation where it's like, I know there's a high probability I'm fighting something like Assault on Helm's Deep, that the ability to take the march plus the drum, because all right. So why don't we pause on that? So the way this army fights, to sum it up, the way this army wins is it gets to the critical points on the battlefield first because it has the drum, and it uses terrain to its benefit to fight on as narrow frontage as possible. And then the phalanx with whomever you have in front of it just rolls over the opponent. Considerations here is this army completely falls apart once the Dragon Emperor goes down. I mean, it can happen. If it happens like in the last turn of the game, it's not that big a deal. And oftentimes there are strategies, by the way, when you want to dismount the Dragon Emperor on the last turn or two of the game, because you get 6 free guys however many guys haven't died on the Palanquin, that can go and secure objectives for you. But if you lose the Dragon Emperor earlier in the game, you have lost the game. And because he is a big base, things like the ring or magic can really mess with him. He does have resistance to magic, but if the spell manages to go through and he gets transfixed and he can't strike up, somebody can put a lot of guys in against him. And if they were smart, they will not target the Dragon Emperor. They will target the Palanquin and take the Palanquin out of the game. And once you take the Palanquin out of the game, if you can do the 6 hits to it, then you lose the fight 5 benefit and you lose the banner. And those are both huge for the army. So you have to be very careful about where you put the Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor, at least when I play it, starts behind the phalanx, and I choose where to put the Dragon Emperor in, and he goes in someplace safe. And he goes in someplace where he's not going to get trapped, where he can just he's got phalanx on either side of him, and he can just kind of march forward, kill a couple guys a turn, which is probably all you're going to get after the first turn. You're going to get 1 or at least 2 warriors with the Dragon Emperor, because his base is just too big. You're not going to move forward. You need your other guys, like your Rutabi and your Borgir, to actually do the hero killing, because you have to put the Dragon Emperor someplace where he's not going to get ganged up and killed. And at that point, somebody can just kind of throw a random dude in front of him, every turn, and he eats a dude. He's like a monster in that respect, because of the size of his base. Countering this list. Before I put it out to the floor, why don't I just kind of talk through the things that others have used to counter this list and the things that kind of I'm afraid of. First of all, as I mentioned, this army fights best on a narrow frontage. Anything you can do to either encircle this army or force it to spread out will decrease its effectiveness markedly. So ideally you want to fight this army on a pool table where there's nothing to anchor its flanks, and you want to extend, instead of fighting in a shield wall, you want to put very limited stuff in front of the phalanx and then just try and envelop it on both sides the best you can. And where this army starts to struggle is where stuff starts lapping around the flanks of the phalanx, and you get kind of internal traps where guys can't back up. And then you can get traps and you can start killing people. That's the first way to beat it. The second way to beat it is to take out the Dragon Emperor. And the ways to there's two ways to take out the Dragon Emperor. One is to put it in a situation where either magic is going to prevent him from striking up, or you can get something like the ring into it, or a bat swarm into it, or an invisible spider or something like that, that will have its fight value. And if you can get something into it that's going to have its fight value, the Dragon Emperor is in real trouble, because you can gang up a lot of guys on the Dragon Emperor. And if you can start winning fights, you can kill the Palanquin out from under him, and then it's kind of downhill quickly with this army. So those are the kind of the two things that are scary about this. The third thing that's scary about this is things that force the army not to fight in a ball. So horde armies playing reconnoiter is a real problem for this army. Horde armies playing objective scenarios where they have to split up and not just cover like 2 objectives, but cover like 4 or 5 is a problem for this army. And if you're going to play an objective army against a horde, or even an objective army against anything else, when you're playing the Host of the Dragon Emperor, you don't go into it going, I'm going to grab every one of the objectives. You go into it going, I need 3 out of these 5 objectives to win. These are the 3 I'm going to capture, and I'm going to leave the other 2 to the other player, and I'm going to win it that way. Sorry. So those are the thing, the concerns I have when playing this list. And Evan can, because Evan and I have clashed many times with these lists, and I don't know what experience you guys have. I know, Devin, you haven't played against this, but
I've played with it only at your tournament, and so I don't have a ton of experience with it. So what I'm going to end up doing is kind of operating as the player who, just throwing out a couple different scenarios. Actually, before I get into that, the scenarios of which we would discuss. Okay, in that situation, how would you handle the Host of the Dragon Emperor? Evan, with your experience, is there anything your father missed on counters to this army?
Yeah, I think he hit most of the points, and it's that the Emperor is super important. How you play him is important. He should simultaneously be doing damage in of himself, whilst also being safe and providing that benefit for his army. If you are playing against him, you gotta take out that Palanquin. You gotta figure out some way to take it out. You get into him, he can't heroic defense the Palanquin, so you can hit it pretty hard. If you manage to trap it and get a strength 4 hero on him, you can kill the Palanquin basically in one shot. I've actually experimented, because I've used lists before that have 2 or 3 models that can cast Black Dart. I've actually in-depth theorized how many turns it would take of spamming Black Dart to be able to kill the Palanquin just from Black Darts. And obviously the resistance to magic gets in the way. But even if you burn through tons and tons of will doing it, in the end it's worth it, because this army is entirely dependent on these buffs from the Palanquin to be able to function. And once you take that away, it just becomes some regular old standard army, and you can beat that. But yeah, using shooting as well against this army in a smart way is
and
useful.
also
Not
siege weapons, by the
yes,
way, is something I should have
siege
mentioned.
engines destroy it. Well, you sort of mentioned it in that if it's forced to spread out, it will be much easier to beat. And there is nothing that forces you to spread out more than siege engines, right?
I think elevated
because
shooting
you don't
too
want to
helps.
stay together.
Like one thing you always see is sometimes your archers who aren't engaged in fighting never have a role because everyone is like engaged in a fight. You're always going to have Easterling pikemen who are not engaged in a fight. So I think elevated shooting, you put a couple elves on a watchtower or something like that, like that's gonna give you not the edge, but it's beneficial where other times it wouldn't be.
I would actually argue against that because
I
the
would
elves
do
are
the
only
same.
elves are only wounding on 6s, and the
Frostbite.
the Dragon Emperor Legion like eats elves because it basically equals their fight value, and because of the way the points work out, it may actually outnumber them. And the more elves they're like sitting up on rooftops trying to snipe out defense 6 warriors, the better, because it leaves the guys that are on the ground even more vulnerable.
Let's talk about some shooting actually with that. So as far as target priority, what I'm hearing here is regardless of what army you have strength 3 bows, strength 2 bows, all that. If you're able to target the Dragon Emperor, just shoot him, like focus all fire on him, or would you actually spread those shots out and try to thin numbers?
So it depends where the Dragon Emperor. If you have clean shots on the Dragon Emperor, shoot at the Dragon Emperor. But if you don't, and you probably don't, because I mean, one advantage of his big base size is he's very easy to screen. You're probably going to end up shooting through at least one file of pikemen to get at him, and then it's just, I mean, you can, because then you can just kill the pikemen. But you know, don't worry yourself about it. The real issue is the siege engines, because the siege engine is the one thing that can just, if they get a hit on him, if they get a direct hit on him, that's the one thing that can knock him off the palanquin instantly. So he has to, siege engines for him are terrifying, and you either need to figure out how to close as quickly as possible, or just put as many things between you and the siege engine.
Well, with Easterlings closing quickly,
as possible,
too difficult. So
yeah, but you have, I mean, especially against evil siege engines who don't care if you're in combat with anybody else, that's a real problem. Like Assault on Helm's Deep is really the army that this legion does not want to play against, because there's only a 6-inch minimum range. They're sitting at the back of the board, and there's probably 2 or 3 of them out there, and eventually one of them is going to get a hit on the Emperor and knock him off.
So
yeah, I'd say with shooting at the Emperor, I would be cognizant of how much damage you believe you will be able to do to him with shooting. Because if you get 1 wound with shooting, that's not going to affect much, right? So if you just have like maybe 1 pot shot, and you know that you're going to have very few chances to actually get in on him and try and get more damage on Palanquin, I would maybe prioritize dropping the model count more. But if you're able to say is it 3 or 4 wounds that halves his movement?
3 wounds halves his movement.
So if you can confidently say, okay, I've got this wall of archers that can see him clearly, or has like an in the way, and I've got like a guy that can call heroic accuracy or something, and you can cleanly say, all right, I can get him to the point where I can half his movement, then that is absolutely something you should try and do, because even halving his movement just makes it so much more difficult for him to do what he wants to do. But if you can't muster that, I'd say target priority, cataphracts first. That's the first thing you shoot at. That's the first thing I always shoot at. Try and dismount them, get them off their horses, or kill them either way, because they're going to be what's doing the real damage to your army, because they have the hitting power with the mounted knockdown and extra attack. And then just kill as many of the fight 5 black dragons that you can. Yeah. Take the in the ways, go through the front rank, and just kill the black dragons and try and remove as much fight 5 from the army, because that's really what's going to get you in the combat phase.
And if you're playing the cataphracts, by the way, always buy them in 3s, because they have the special rule. I think it's Gleaming Horde or something like that.
The Glistening Horde or something.
Glisten, yeah, or whatever. So that when you put 3 of them together touching, which you can do in a little triangle, it increases both the defense of the riders to 7 and the defense of the horses to 6, which makes them fairly difficult to take out. And then you keep them behind the phalanx too until the lines close, and then they can come out and fight. But you keep him in a situation where he's got to like get through 3 ranks of pikes before he gets to your defense 6 cataphracts. I mean, shooting absent siege engines is not actually that scary a prospect for this army, unless, I mean, the exception being, I guess, mass crossbows. But because you have the ability to close quickly and you're pretty much defense 6 across the board, unless you're one of these armies that decided to take the Dragon Cult Acolytes, in which case those guys are going to, by the way, whenever you have a chance to shoot a Dragon Cult Acolyte, shoot a Dragon Cult Acolyte, because they're a high payoff target. But the speed at which these guys close, combined with the fact that it's like defense 6 or 7 across the board, makes it fairly hard to rack up a lot of shooting kills against this army.
So let's talk about a scenario then where someone's got a hard-hitting model in their army and their whole army is kind of contingent on it. So let's use the example of the list that Alex submitted earlier. If he was going against your 700-point army, he's got Radagast flying around, doing all this damage. Maybe it's Bard, maybe it's something, but something hard-hitting. Should he focus fire that model into the Dragon Emperor, or should he focus that model into trying to just clear models?
No, he does not want to go into the Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor wants the Dragon Emperor wants to hunt him down. Yeah. And the counter use for the Dragon Emperor, because this is how I play against Angmar too, is the Dragon Emperor just sits in the back and he waits for Gullivar to get tempted to come over the top somewhere, and then the Dragon Emperor just homes in on Gullivar once he comes over the top,
like 7 trike kind of thing.
And he just goes into him and he strikes up. And there's 2. So one of the advantages the Dragon Emperor has is he cannot get knocked down or hurled or any of that stuff by a monster. So a monster is going to go in and fight him head to head. And as long as he can strike up, he's got a lot. I mean, he's got 3 dice, plus he gets his free banner, plus he gets his free extra die for being a hero in the Legion. So he's rolling 5 dice to win the dual roll. And he's fight 6 to begin with. He's got an Elven Blade. He's gonna be striking, and the odds are that if he can pin somebody down in the backfield, that a bunch of pikemen can pile on as well. So as soon as a flying monster kind of like comes over the top of the line and tries to like hurl down the side of the phalanx, that's when the Emperor kind of goes into action and counters that guy. And I think I've taken out like 2 or 3 Gullivars with him using that exact thing. You do not want to fight the Dragon Emperor with Gullivar, because even if Gullivar defenses, if the Dragon Emperor wins, he's got his 3 attacks, plus he's got the 6 attacks from the Palanquin. And oh, by the way, if you can trap that guy, all of that gets doubled, and suddenly you're rolling like 18 dice for 6, and that can ruin even somebody who's defensing. It can ruin their entire day.
So. Yeah, as an Angmar player who has played against Easterlings multiple times, my Gullivar is never anywhere near the Dragon Emperor. And part of that is what Dad said about him losing to the Emperor. But I'd say that even if Gullivar beats the Dragon Emperor, like maybe the Emperor gets transfixed multiple times, or he runs out of might so he can't strike anymore, you're still going to lose, because it's going to take you 2-3 turns to take out the Dragon Emperor, and while you're doing that, the Easterlings are demolishing the rest of your army, because you've committed so many points to a model that just fights, and they've committed significantly less points to a model that works perfectly fine, just buffing the rest of the army. And the Easterlings are just going to cut through your orcs. They're going to cut through your lake towners, and you're going to lose. So you really need that big hero to be dealing with the stupid broken 9-point Easterling warriors that are taking out your troops.
All right. So I guess we got about maybe 5 more minutes here. Rainey, do you have any throw out questions for players who might have some specific circumstances?
Not really. I think I'm in your kind of situation, Devin, but I love playing Easterlings, but because I live in Honduras, I haven't really played against them too much.
Oh, not a huge Honduran tournament down there.
You don't see them. Like, you don't go to the local shop and see like a whole bunch of like meta players with their legions popping up. No, yeah. So I don't know. I'm really curious about it. I hear a lot of things online saying it's broken, it's this, it's that. I'm sure
Actually, let's talk about that question. Matt,
Yeah,
Evan, is it broken? Do you
I
feel?
don't.
Do you want me to start, or do you want to go first, Steph?
You go ahead.
All right. So I don't think it is broken in the current meta, where there are a bunch of these horde armies out there that are even more broken, and like Assault on Helm's Deep is. There are a number of armies out there that are very competitive, and armies you often see that the host of the Dragon Emperor will really struggle against. What the host of the Dragon Emperor does really well is it fights other armies of equivalent size really well. So it is devastating against armies of like elves and things like that. Or armies that have like, these are my 2 big hitters, and then I've got 30 other models kind of running around too, because Rutabi and the Dragon Emperor will check the 2 big hitters, and then the Easterlings will tear apart the rest of the army. But what there are enough armies out there for which this army is just kind of has natural weaknesses, that I don't think it's necessarily broken. I think it is definitely one of the most competitive lists out there. But it is certainly it is not invulnerable.
So I think what I personally don't believe this list is broken, but this comes with a caveat. I think the list is, by the numbers, by the books, and in the game, too strong. I think it gets too much for the points it pays. It's ridiculous at basically every points level, point for point. It's got the best troops, it's got the best heroes, it's got these insane things, like Borgir just being nuts, Rutabi's nuts, obviously the Emperor is crazy. But the list doesn't have the big stupid factor that I think the other 2 lists that I believe are better than it have, which are the 2 assault lists. There's nothing about this list other than like the big banner effect, which other lists have, like Gondor and Lake Town and stuff like that, that you look at and go, wow, this is some stupid game-winning BS that I won't be able to beat. The Easterlings is a fair army that beats every other fair army. Like Gondor, it beats elves, it beats dwarves, it can have struggles against, but I would argue still beats. It's just it takes those sort of like fair, balanced, like normal model count armies, and even slightly above that, like, you know, 50-ish model armies. And then it's better than them. But unlike Assault on Lothlorien and Assault upon Helm's Deep, which just have these incredibly stupid mechanics, which, in my personal opinion, destroy the inherent balance of the game and change the game into something worse. It does not have that. And I think personally, I would be very happy if this was the best army in the game, but it is not. And the 2 assault lists are the best army in the game, and they make the game actively unpleasant to play both competitively and casually. So is it very, very strong? Maybe a little bit overtuned? I'd say yes. But is it broken, and do I want it nerfed? Not currently, no.
I mean, in playing this army, I played a lot of games with this. I don't think I've ever really been in a game where I played a kind of well-constructed army and thought, this guy doesn't have a prayer. Whereas I have played Goblin Town, and I have played Assault on Lothlorien, and I have played Assault on Helm's Deep, and run into, you know, perfectly well-constructed armies, looked across the table, looked at the scenario, and gone, well, this game's over now. There's nothing this guy can do to win this scenario. And I haven't bumped into that with the Easterlings. And, you know, I also, I think, having played this army a number of times, I don't run into a bunch of people who come out of the game going, oh, that wasn't any fun. You know, when I come out of a game playing this army, even ones that I've kind of won handily, people come out and said, that was a really fun game. That was a really, you know, good thinking, fun game to play. And, you know, I'm sorry I lost, but it was a fun game to lose. Whereas, you know, that's not true against some of these other lists where, you know, I played it and like I felt like apologizing to my opponent after the game. So, you know, I think that's why I don't think this is a broken list. I think it's a very strong and very competitive list, but I don't think it's broken.
All right. Well, then, hey, sounds good. I actually, so for anyone who has more questions for Matt and Evan, obviously they're regulars on this channel. So feel free to comment in the YouTube section where you can ask other questions about the Host of the Dragon Emperor, or you can comment whether or not you would take Mutabi or a captain, because clearly we are undecided on that subject. So with all that being said, appreciate the experience Matt and Evan bring on this army. If you also want us to talk about a different Legion in depth, just like this, let us know in the comment section below. We're trying to find an expert who's been playing that for at least 30 games. Seems like the minimum required. So, all right then. Well, without that being said, we'll talk to you all very soon.
Bye, everybody.